Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the 2030 Vision AI and the Future of Law podcast. I'm your co host, Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers, here with the phenomenal Bridget McCormack, president and CEO of the American Arbitration Association. Hi, Bridget. How are you?
I am good, Jen. It's good to see you. I miss you.
I miss you too. Where are you today?
I am out in West Michigan in my new home office that I am my own tech support for. That used to be our kids club. If folks listen to our last conversation, they know that story. And we'll see how the Wi-Fi works based on my setup.
I love it. I love it. Well, it's great to see you, and I'm happy that you're stationary for a little while. You're always traveling. And we are going to have an efficient episode today. We're excited to dive into the topic of whether we are about to have an era of more nuanced conversations about ethics and lawyers and generative AI. And we'll talk about two cases that made the headlines for lawyers using Gen AI in their day to day legal work. But of course, as we always do, each episode will start with two other segments to get us started. The first are our AI ahas, those ways in which we've been using generative AI in our own lives that we find particularly interesting. And then we'll give an update on what just happened in the broader world, something interesting that our legal audience might have missed in the midst of their busy lives. So maybe you can kick us off with your AI aha, Bridget.
I don't know if mine this week is that interesting or useful to lawyers specifically, but my husband and I were up north in northern Michigan this weekend and walking around this property that we own up there. We have this big wooded lot with lots of hills. And every time we've walked it, we like find new parts of it. Um, and this time we found 2 old cars, like one old truck and one old car that were both like obviously had been there for decades based on like my just looking at them. And so of course to figure out exactly what the make and model were, I used my ChatGPT app and took photos of different parts of each of them so that ChatGPT could identify like was it a we were really curious about like what make and model truck it was and what make and model car. It was a Studebaker, by the way, the truck, and the car was a Dodge, I forget. But it literally was able to like, identify like between 47 and 49 basically for each of them. And all these other details about them. So then of course we decided we were going to have ChatGPT do our nature lessons throughout the rest of the woods. Like we were trying to figure out what the difference between the different evergreens or firs or whatever. Like what's the difference between this one and that one? And not only would it you just take a photo and upload it, it would tell you about it, but it would also then tell you how to make sure. Like you have to try see if you can roll the needles in your fingers. If they roll, it's this. If they don't roll, it's this other thing. It was like this interactive ChatGPT was like walking me through the plants in the woods, and teaching us about them. I'm really hoping we have trillium back there, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous flower that does grow in that kind of area. But it's a little early for trillium. But I saw these like green things popping up, and I was trying to figure out if they were going to be trillium. And ChatGPT is amazing. It tells you it's like, "Do you want me to show you a photo of what Trillium would look like at that phase?" And I'm like, "Yeah, show me the photo." And it just, like, predicts it's the ChatGPT says, "I can produce a really, really realistic photo." And I was like, "Go for it, ChatGPT." So anyway, we had a woods tutor is my use case. It was pretty fun.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. Were the cars in, like, decent shape, or had they been there for a long, long time? Did you ask it how long they'd been there?
They've clearly been there since, I don't know, I mean, probably 4, 5, 6 decades, like a very long time. They've been
Wow.
there for a very, very long
Wow.
time. Oh, one of the other things I got, there was a big pile of, clearly some kind of animal scat, but not scat that was recognizable to me. And so I asked ChatGPT what kind of scat is this? And it was porcupine scat, which
No
apparently
way.
is I know, which is apparently like knowable because of like the fiber I don't need to get into the details of the scat, but pretty amazing. But and then, of course, I got terrified because I was like, "Well, if there's a porcupine, like, under this, like, truck, like, we're in porcupine trouble." My husband was like, "What do you mean by that? Like, are you gonna touch it?" I was like, "No, but it shoots you with its needles." He's like, "It does not shoot its needles. That's not what happens." Of course, I asked ChatGPT and he was right. They do not shoot their needles. That's like I must have seen that in a cartoon at some point.
We're in porcupine trouble.
Anyway, what about you? Do you have a good one this week?
So mine, it wasn't all that like creative, but it was sort of mind blowing. So we are rebuilding our team website, and this is like the type of task that just I never seem to have time to do. And we got the draft wireframe and sample page, like we can go in and look at it. And we just have not had the time to, like, sit around and make a list, and I blocked off, like, 2 hours to sit through, and it's a small website, but even for a small website, there's, like, 25 subpages that you click onto, and I started, like, making a bullet point list of, like, all the changes, and then I thought, "I wonder what this would be like if I tried to use ChatGPT voice mode to go through it." So I opened voice mode and I told it, like, "I'm looking at this website. I want you to act like an assistant, and I'm just gonna tell you as I'm going through it what I want changed." And it was like, as you would imagine, it's like, "Great, I'm ready to hear your feedback." And I said, "Okay, I'm on the homepage now. I don't like this font here. I want it to look more modern. I don't like this picture." But it also, like, you wouldn't be surprised to know, I would say, I don't really like how this sentence is worded. I'd like it to sound a little bit cleaner, and simpler. And then it would say something like, "Got it. You want it simpler. How about this?" And it was like, perfect. Like, that sounds amazing. And a couple times, like, I think the awkward thing is I'm just waiting, like, I'm not ready to say anything again yet, so I was hesitant to use it for that reason, because I'd still be reading things, but I just kept saying to it, it would say, like, "What's your next correction?" And I would say, "I just need a minute, like, I'm still reading," and then it would say, like, "That's fine. I'm here whenever you need me," and then I would just, once I was ready, say something else, and then I got through the whole website, and then at the end, I was like, "Can you take this and turn it into, like, a bullet point list of page by page corrections?" And it was like, "Absolutely. Here's your page. Would you like it converted to a Google Doc?" It was unbelievable. And again, it's, like, not that mind-blowing in terms of what it did. It's just I would have spent so much time doing that. And then I would have had to type out the bullet points. It was just so cool.
Yeah, that's actually I mean, you're right. It is the kind of thing that we know it does well, but that's the kind of like I'm still having these breakthroughs, right? In my regular workflows where it occurs to me like, wait a minute, why am I doing this alone? I have my helper over here. But that one you just described is amazing because it can be keeping track of it. It's like again, like actually working with a coworker, right? Who's kind of listening to you and keeping track of all of it and then producing like a perfect final product. That's amazing. That's really, really smart. I like that.
Yeah, and like you with the, is it called Trillium? Is that what it's called?
Trillium. Yep.
Like, it always it's always willing to go the extra step for
Oh
you, so
yeah.
it's like, "Oh, I don't really like the way this is laid out, but I'm not sure exactly why," and then it'll be like, "Would you like me to propose some different ways that we could lay this out?" Like, "Sure, because I have no
Yeah.
idea what I'm doing." So, yeah, it's just it really is like you and I always talk about in presentations, like, it is the smartest, most eager intern you've ever had that
Yeah.
is just looking for your direction.
Totally.
That was my one. My other one was not Gen AI, I don't think, but I used 11 Labs, which I'd heard about from some friends, which is just, an app that you can use to convert text to audio. So getting ready for our conversation today, I dropped the URL for the 2027 report, which we'll talk about in a minute, into 11 Labs and listened to it, last night while I was lying in bed, and that was so easy and delightful. So I'm definitely gonna do that more, and I think it's free. I mean, I didn't sign up for anything, but it was very fast, and I think I'm gonna start, like, loading things in. It's sort of like Notebook LM, but not as fancy, but I could load things in and go for a walk and listen to them. Those were some really cool AI ahas this week, even if they weren't, like, mind-bending technology, like you said, just finding new and interesting ways to use the tools that we have. Um, so today in our What Just Happened segment, which is where we talk about things from the broader macro tech development world and share them with our legal audience, we were going to dive into what is called the AI 2027 report. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Bridget, to sort of summarize what this report is. It's basically a futuristic prediction of the next few years of AI development, but I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do my best, and then you can supplement as always. But I mean, my attention was drawn to this report because the artificial intelligence podcast hosts Paul Reitzer and Mike Kaput were talking about it on Tuesday, and then on Friday, Hard Fork podcast host Kevin Roos and Casey Newton. Sorry, I can't. Sorry, Casey. I love you, Casey. I don't know why I forgot your name.
I love Casey.
We're talking about it as well. In fact, they interviewed, one of the authors of this report, and so, I can see he's also been interviewed basically on every kind of tech podcast in the last
Mhm.
week. So it's just kind of making the rounds in the AI community, and therefore I just got interested enough to try and pull it up and take a look. And basically, it's this very, very detailed, like, scenario, forecasting document, although it's written in a nice narrative form, actually. It's quite easy to read, that predicts the ways in which, AI might evolve over the next few years. And they predict this very dramatic takeoff around 2027, which I understand from one of the interviews, and I can't now remember which one, was actually pushed back a year from their original thinking. Like, originally, I think they thought everything that they predict happening in 2027 was going to happen a year earlier. But after the work they did, they pushed that back a year. The lead researcher, I don't know if it's a lead researcher, but one of them was an OpenAI researcher. I did not know this, but learned again from one of the interviews that Daniel Kokotajlo, he left OpenAI when he became concerned about safety issues, actually. So I don't know how, if that should influence how we think about his predictions or not. But that was interesting to know. And now he works at this not for profit located in Berkeley, California, called the AI Futures Project. And he and his co-authors, believe that AI could surpass human intelligence by 2027, and that the transformative changes that will result from that are ones that, nobody is planning for. Basically, I'm summarizing here, but they're, tumultuous and, um, really impactful, and we are really thinking very hard about what that's gonna mean. I think the way he puts it is, within this decade, there will be enormous changes that exceed those of the Industrial Revolution. And I think we've sort of heard this in other places before. I mean, it sort of reminds me of Dario Amadei's Machines of Loving Grace from a few months back. And we've had a few essays from other leaders of some of the leading labs, that say similar things about the trajectory. So the trajectory, in a way, isn't surprising. I think one reason why people are taking note is because Daniel and, some of his others, some of the other people on his team have a very good history of predicting, AI outcomes, and they have for many years now. So their future forecasting has been right, historically, and because they're not associated with the lab, you can't really give it a discount of them trying to hype their own technology, right? So they're really just trying to get it right. Like, in his interview on the Hard Fork podcast, he said he's, like, really eager for people to tell him why he's wrong. Like, they have there's, like, a portal where you can, send ideas for where you think they missed a step, in their very robust forecasting methodology, and they will think about them and respond to them. And, like, they wanted it to be the start of a conversation, and one where they hope they're wrong about, like, the bad outcomes, which is part of, what they've kinda mapped out, but they really wanted to start a conversation. I think that's, a pretty decent explanation of what it's about. Does that seem right to you?
Yeah, no, that was excellent. And the only thing that I would add, like you said, I think the lead author had written a piece before ChatGPT emerged, basically predicting the entire ChatGPT moment. And I think I heard on one of the podcasts that the only thing that was flawed in his original projections was that he anticipated that they would take longer than they actually did in real life. So he was a little bit more conservative than real life, but I think most of what he predicted turned out to be true, which is why people are paying attention to it. And the other pieces that struck me really were um, the idea of this escalating war for AI supremacy between the US and China. And this paper came out before the tariff war really started as well, which is sort of interesting because a few weeks before this paper came out, I listened to another podcast with another, expert in geopolitics and AI, and their theory was sort of that the major powers in the world would ultimately be incentivized to collaborate to try to shape the future in a way that was responsible as this AI is becoming more and more powerful. And obviously, it seems to me that that's highly unlikely, more unlikely now than it was even when this paper came out. But the other thing that it made me think, so it talked about the political ramifications and this accelerating arms race between the US and China. It also talked about, the escalating public backlash around AI as we start to see more and more job disruption, and if you go in the report, which, like, I don't think people necessarily need to read the report unless they're interested. It is visually, like, super cool the way that they've laid it out, and they have sort of a dashboard on the right-hand side of the page, and I think it's at AI2027.com, AI-2027.com. But one of the, pieces of information that where their prediction changes is the public's perception, the percentage of the public who perceive AI to be a major problem that needs to be addressed currently is at around 1%. And in 2 years, when this super intelligence emerges, the dashboard has it at around 20%. And of course, we're seeing all sorts of instability already in our system. So the idea that there would be even more instability to me seemed like something to take note of. And I think the reason why they created the report was not necessarily to be right about everything, but to raise awareness so people start having better conversations about it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the one thing that was I don't know, it seemed convincing enough to me, a non-technologist, for why we see such acceleration once, as they put it, AI gets to be better than humans at coding. Is that at that point the AI code the sort of super intelligent AI coders can supervise a lot of other super intelligent AI coders, and the acceleration of progress at that point just really takes off. And that that sort of makes sense to me. I can see how that acceleration happens if, in fact, um, AI becomes super intelligent and better at coding than any humans are. So, um, yeah, I think it's worth knowing it's out there and knowing people are taking it seriously, and maybe even listening to one of the many interviews I think you can find. I see that Dwarkish Patel also interviewed Daniel, and so I haven't listened to that one yet, but I plan to, just because I think he does great interviews. So, interesting piece of work. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought one thing for legal audiences that was interesting in the projection analysis was that one of the early pieces of the roadmap to getting to super intelligence was really a deeper focus on research agents, which to me just feels so squarely within the ambit of what lawyers do. So I think because of the group of people focused on this, so much attention is paid to coding. And that is, of course, like where the use cases are now and where the early impact is. But the research piece stood out to me, and at the same time, I was thinking about I was in San Francisco recently, and, they say when you drive through a city, you can tell exactly what's going on by what's on their billboards, and, like, I'm in Philly, and everything is personal injury attorneys and jewelry stores. Um, and there's not anything really going on in the AI landscape publicly. But if you go through San Francisco, it feels like you are in the future. Like every single billboard is about AI. And so I'm like everybody else, like my takeaway is like it's good to have people thinking about these things. My sense is probably they're so close to it that it will be a little bit longer until the rest of the world feels the impact of whatever is happening where they are.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I don't know that, even if they're completely right about forecasting the technology, um, I'm not like, it seems to me there are a bunch of other places along the way where there are gonna be log jams, before, um, eh, the technology completely disrupts everything about our lives. But it's interesting to know, that it's out there and people are talking about it and that it doesn't come from one of the labs. I think that's kind of what's most important about it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting for our audience to know. I mean, people listening to this might be deeply steeped in AI and really interested in it, but we both know we visit parts of the profession where nobody's talking about it. Like this is the first time they've heard about it. And so I find these things interesting just to share with my lawyer friends, even though they're sick of hearing about it. Like there are people, all the people that don't talk to me at pizza night anymore, like, there are people who think, 2 to 3 years from now that this technology will be superhuman. So it's just kind of mind bending to talk to lawyers who aren't thinking about it at all. Um, but that sort of brings us to our main topic, which is what is happening in the land of the lawyers. And we wanted to talk today about the two sides of the ethics coin. So ever since ChatGPT emerged on the scene and poor Steven Schwartz cited those hallucinated cases in the brief he filed with federal court, almost all of the conversation around ethics has been focused on the ethical risks involved in using AI and hallucinations and biases. But we're starting to see data, and we talked about it on a recent podcast with the VALS benchmarking study, that AI are increasingly as accurate as we are at producing new content. And now today we were going to talk about whether we're going to start to see a shift in the conversation about ethics towards a world where it will soon become unethical not to understand how to integrate these tools into your day-to-day practice. And we have 2 examples of case studies where the headlines might lead you to believe that AI was really like the transformative piece of the litigation involved in both of these cases. On a closer read, it's probably a little bit more mundane than that, but I think still important for people to be paying attention to. So maybe I could turn to you, Bridget, and ask you to guide us through the 2 different cases that have come out with some AI influence in their lawyering.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about both is that they both, were the AI had a place in the headline about each of these cases. One, they're both med mal cases,
And both in
and
Georgia, which
and
is
both in
interesting.
Georgia, personal injury practices in Georgia. One where there was a $25 million verdict, and one there was a $7.2 million verdict. And I don't really think that the particular med mal underlying issue is what was most important about them. That the headline, in each case, it was like AI, wins a $25 million verdict, which isn't exactly what happened. And maybe I'm exaggerating the headline, but I think it overstated like the role of AI in each of them. On the other hand, in each case, the use cases, the way the lawyers use them were were the ways I think a lot of people are using them just in regular, everyday life. They were not for, researching or presenting like AI written documents to a court, which seems to be where everybody's got the most um, concerns, but rather in helping them present their case. So in the $25 million case, the lawyer used ChatGPT to help her think about how to talk about the particular injury to a jury. And it was like many mid mal cases, there's a sad story. And how you talk about that particular sad story to a group of 12 people who are not lawyers, but are having to make some legal judgments that are around facts, is the kind of thing that, frankly, the technology would be great at. Like, I'm not surprised at all that she was able to get good help from the technology to think about how to talk about the underlying injury in that case. And in the other case, the lawyer used ChatGPT again to help prepare for the expert testimony on the other side. I believe he said they even were able to find, a paper where one of the experts on the other side had, said not X when he was testifying to X. They literally found, like a smoking gun statement by an expert that they would never have found on their own. And, you and I know from like the work that deep research does that no matter how good we are at legal research or Google research or any other kind of research, um, we're no match for what the capabilities are that this technology has now. So that too feels like a very like yes for sure. Like why would you not try that? You would do all the things you normally do, I think, but then why wouldn't you um get some help with thinking through the expert testimony you're going to be facing, especially since you have their reports, right? And you can go figure out in advance like what else is out there that you might want to ask about in a really targeted way. Um, so in neither case was there anything about the use of the technology that I think would cause anyone to say, "Oh no, there's like an ethical concern in using it." And I think to your point, it's probably the opposite. Like, once you know that it can help you present a better closing argument, especially around, a tricky or sticky, set of facts, to talk about to people, or once you know that you can get help, figuring out how to counter an expert, that is, at the end of the day, what the whole case is about in a med mal case, um, isn't it unethical to not use the technology that, is available to you? It is so interesting. I mean, I was doing a prep session earlier today for a presentation I'm doing in June to a group of lawyers in a practice area where they're really, really late to the party, but they're trying to figure this out. Like, what does it mean for our practice area? And the folks organizing the conference, like, kept focusing on, like, we need to know all the ethical problems and all the ethical risks and I was thinking like, well, I mean, I'm gonna probably sell you on both sides of that. Like, yes, you wanna be really careful about what you do with any confidential information. I think we all know that lesson now. And you wanna check the technology's work because it's gonna give you an answer even when it's, like, not sure. But you might have to use it, to provide competent representation once the technology can do things that you simply can't do as well. Um, I don't know. What did I miss there in the 2 cases?
Nothing. I mean, I think too, I think our shared worldview on the legal profession writ large is that we're not client centered enough, not public centered enough, and we're very lawyer and judge centric. And I think if you were to ask the average person paying her lawyer to represent her in a case, like, this powerful technology exists, we could use it or not. Um, you know, would you like us to use it with safety guardrails in place? Like, I don't know many people who would say no. I think it's good, that the ABA guidance came out and there's discussion about having informed consent with your clients, but to me, that's the whole ballgame. That's why you're there. And I think the $7.2 million verdict case to me stood out as just, you're representing people and you're seeing this tiny little piece of the ocean through discovery and through your research that you're able to do, but there's just these depths of data and information that you haven't had access to, or new ways of thinking about things or sharing things like the $25 million verdict. And I don't know why you wouldn't wanna plumb the depths of the ocean and find all of these different things that are like unlocks for lawyers. So I too have been trying to have a more nuanced conversation, and actually, like, I have found that it really perks up lawyers' ears when they hear that part of it because they're not hearing that part of the story about all the things they could be doing.
I feel like we had this one, sort of counter argument to, all of the risks, all the ethical risks, which was fees, which even the ABA formal opinion, flagged for lawyers. And we've heard from, in-house counsel, right, that say if you can do the work with the help of this technology at, a fraction of the cost, there is an ethical rule that says you have to do that. And that I feel like people have had their heads around, or lawyers have had their heads around now for some time, which has been the primary reason why I think lawyers are like, "I guess I'm gonna have to figure it out," right? Like, I'm gonna have a duty to, an ethical duty to for cost reasons, but also, just to be competitive in my market. If my neighbor's figuring it out and can offer the same services significantly cheaper, if I wanna continue to compete, I'm gonna have to use it. But this is like just an extra layer to that. It's not only that you can do it and save money, but that's true here as well, but it's you can do it better. Like, that's the difference, right? When I used to do jury trials, either before I was on the faculty and or at even when I was working with clinic students, I hardly ever had clients who had, like, significant resources for any of that litigation. Sometimes in our post-conviction innocence clinic litigation, we were able to recruit volunteer experts, but it was always volunteer experts. There's a tremendous upside for lawyers who are working on really important cases but don't have big budgets, whether they're at small firms, in solo practice, in, post-conviction innocence clinic practices where they really don't have the kinds of, budgets for experts or to counter experts that traditionally you needed. I'm not sure you do anymore. So it's really, I think that's a huge benefit to the legal profession generally.
Same, and we've been saying from the beginning, I thought it was fun that these were 2 plaintiffs' lawyers, who benefited from this, not that they were enormous firms on the other side in these 2 specific cases, but you can see how going up against a behemoth firm, if you're able to source some of that research or shape your closing argument in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise, it just gives you such a leg up. And so I'm like just constantly on the hunt now for stories like this to share with lawyers. I think it really makes concrete what we've been trying to say in a very theoretical way. And I hope more lawyers start to think about these tools as augmenters of their abilities.
Yeah, you just gave me an idea. It is actually these two specific examples are so great because they are concrete and lawyers will be able to relate to them right away, right? We always hear when we present to lawyers like, "Okay, I get it. It's definitely a disruptive technology, but what do I do with it? Like how do I really do something with what I've heard today?" And I like having these two examples.
Well, we will wait and see how the ethical landscape changes. But for those lawyers out there, we hope this gives you inspiration for the many ways you can incorporate AI in ways big and small into your practice. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you on the next episode of 2030 Vision AI and the Future of Law. Take care till then. Thank you for tuning in to 2030 Vision AI and the Future of Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Stay informed and inspired as we continue to explore the AI driven future of the legal profession. We'll see you next time.